In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning. I can see there is Miss Connie there, which is very nice. I hope you're well. It's good to see you there. I'd say, what sort of day is today? Nothing like yesterday. Yesterday was really rather a beautiful day. We had quite a lot of sunshine. I went outside for a bit. I saw the daffodils and things all coming up, which was a lovely thing to see. Makes a nice change, that one does. And lots of other things like primroses and stuff, they're already growing there, and various other things like that. So that was lovely. Today, though, windy, cold, grey, raining, unpleasant, and so goes on. So there we are. One day is not like another in this country. It's why it is that people always like talking about the weather. It's a nice non-controversial thing. Whereas in some countries where I lived, you could say, oh, the weather's lovely today, isn't it? Yeah, it's just like yesterday, and just like tomorrow will be again. Sunny and warm, and no big breeze, and so on and so on. Good morning to ICBB. I don't know who that is, but thank God, I'm not so bad. And Bev also, good morning. I hope you're well. Enjoying you are a 17-year-old catechumen of the Greek Orthodox Church from Manchester. Woohoo! Do you go to Father Gregory's church, or do you go to one of the other ones? Anyway, welcome. Nice to have you here with us, whatever your name is. And God bless you and keep you. It's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Good morning, Suzanne. Hope you're well as well. It's nice to see you the other day. Hope you enjoyed being us there. Father Demetrius's church. Okay, very good. Well, may God direct you and bless you in all that you do. In Salford, yeah, okay, I know. Good. What else? We've got a number of 16 and 17-year-olds here now wishing to be received. The main problem is that they don't come to church very often. There's some reason why they don't. They find something else to do, which is fair enough. I can more or less understand that, although when I was 16, I pretty well inhabited the local church. And when I was 18, I did inhabit the local church. There we go. Right. Well, no more of this. We will continue to. Big thing has just popped up. We've got Orthodox Christian Teaching podcast in Barnet has turned up. Very good. I think I know who that is. So God bless you and keep you. Nice to see you there. And see you for some little while. Today we're going to be looking at Acts chapter 21, verses 26 through to 34. So without any further ado, let us read it. Then Paul took the men. These are the ones that needed to go through the purification. They had a, They had taken a vow, and now they come to the end of that time of vow, probably a Nazarite vow. So they're fasting, they're praying, and they're abstaining for certain things and so on. And now they've come to the end of that time, and it's time for them to get on and be returned to normal life. And the suggestion was from the church that St. Paul joined them and paid for their vows and their sacrifices to be done. This was a way of ensuring the Jews there understood that a lot of the things they had heard about were not true. This goes either very well right or very badly wrong, depending on whether or not you think that God engineered it. Okay, then Paul took the men, the 4 men just mentioned, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. Now when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people. the law and this place, and furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. Good morning, Helia. And all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now, as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains. They asked who he was and what he had done. And some of the multitude cried one thing and some another. It's meant to remind you, by the way, of the murder of Stephen, and of course the crucifixion of our Lord. Similar things are taking place. They'll become even more obvious tomorrow. So, verse the 26th. One by one we do this now. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time offering should be made for each one of them. So Paul has fallen in with the plan. He does the purification, and he enters the temple to make, it says here, to announce the expiration. In the Greek, it is quite obvious that he is declaring it openly. The word is the angelon rather. And this is a public declaration. Make it clear, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're going to do this. So St. John Chrysostom says, so far he's been hiding himself away, but now he is placing himself in full public view. What will happen, and Paul is not going to be either for it or against it, but he is going to be in full view of everybody. Good morning, Anton and Ahmed and Natalia and Frank, my privileged Frank. And then there will be a sacrifice made for each one of them. Those of you who are interested in Orthodox minutiae will be interested to know that the word for sacrifice being used here is prosphora, which is the name that we give to the loaf that we bring, or the loaves that we bring to church to be offering prosphora, offered back to the Lord, prosphora. So the sacrifice of prosphora will be made after so many days. Meanwhile, they have had a ritual cleansing. Now, this would have been done in a thing called a mikveh or a mikveh. That is a cistern, usually back then carved out of the rock. Nowadays, it could be made of anything. Well, not quite anything, actually. Anything that cannot be polluted. So things like a concrete basin. It's a big concrete basin holding at least 500 litres of water. And this water is quite interesting in itself. If you really want to see the knots that Jewish people tie themselves up in, then it's worthwhile getting on the internet and reading all about it. I remember doing that beforehand and going through and thinking, gosh, how to make life difficult for yourself. One of the things about the water is this: it must come from a spring or be collected as rainwater. So it needs to be pure water. This is not water that has been polluted by people washing in it in an other way, or defecating into it, or urinating into it, anything like that. In case you're thinking, nobody do that, would they? Let's go to Afghanistan and see the water that people use for making bread. It comes out of a thing called a jewi, and you regularly see people defecating into the same water they're going to make bread from later on. Tasty. a certain je ne sais quoi to certain foods. What I say all too well, quoi. And that authentic taste of the East. Anyway, maybe they don't do that anymore, but certainly 50 years ago when I lived there, they did. What was I saying? Oh yeah, mikvah. So nowadays, it will be collected from the roof of the synagogue normally, stored in some sort of big cistern, and then let into the mikvah. It's interesting in that the tube that takes it from the cistern to the mikvah must not have any taps in it, must be open at both ends. Mustn't have any bends or kinks in it either, because the whole idea is it runs straight into the mikvah. Okay? So this is a tricky thing, really. So we have to, we really are glad that we don't have to do this sort of thing. Anyway, you now have such a system. The Jews have decided over time that this must be largely rainwater or largely spring water springing out of the ground. The mikvah is so important that if the synagogue or the community doesn't have one, they can sell their synagogue, or they should sell their synagogue, or their Torah scrolls in order to buy one. Okay, so it's really a really extraordinary thing. It is more important than the scrolls, the scriptures, and more important than the synagogue. So it's the first thing that a Jewish community will begin to build when they move into an area. You think, well, why can't they just put on the tap and fill it up that way? Convenient, but not allowed. Except that so long as there's 1/1,000,000th of a percent more rainwater or spring water in the mikvah than tap water, they're allowed to do this. So they can top it up, and they can then carry on topping it up from the tap afterwards as well. Nowadays, it tends not to be cold. It'll be heated, so it's quite a pleasant experience. But back then, it would have been cold water in a cistern under the ground. We find in the archaeological digs in Israel, lots of them, and a huge and beautiful, luxurious one underneath the home of the high priest, which was recently discovered and excavated in Jerusalem. Anyway, you can spend a happy hour looking up mikvahs if you want to. M-I-K-V-A-H or M-I-K-V-E-H. A-H or E-H. Up to you. Okay? So much for that. Anyway, they do this, and I don't know whether they do it for 7 days, one time after another. I suspect they probably did. And at the end of that time, the 7 days are done, and then you make a sacrifice. Verse 27. Now, when the 7 days are almost ended, we have 27, 28. The Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." Okay, so there are old friends, the Jews from Asia. Remember them? Particularly, St. Paul was preaching and teaching in Asia, what we now call Turkey, especially the western side of Turkey. And particularly in Ephesus. Some of them definitely come from Ephesus because they recognize Trophimus, as we just read a little while ago. And now they see their chance. They spot Paul, and you have to remember that most people wouldn't know what Paul looked like. There were no, he didn't have, I don't know why he didn't have a YouTube channel. It'd be so much more convenient. But he didn't have a YouTube channel or Instagram or TikTok or any of those other things that people have nowadays. Didn't have X. and therefore most people didn't know what he looked like. And they seized their chance, and they say 4 major things about him. Number 1, he teaches against the people. He teaches everywhere against the people. Interesting little slip here. We get an insight into what they thought were people and what were not people. And the people were the other Jews, and everybody else wasn't quite the same. Okay. Number 2, he was preaching against the law. Well, we know that is not quite true, but we know what it is that they mean. And that is, he was saying that people didn't need to be circumcised, men didn't need to be circumcised, and you didn't need to keep the Sabbath. These are the works of the law that St. Paul definitely preaches against. And number 3, they said he preached against the temple. Well, had they opened their eyes and looked, they'd have noticed that St. Paul was in the temple and about to make a sacrifice there. Ergo, this is an entirely false claim. What St. Paul would be saying, though, is this, that there's another sacrifice that has already been made that takes the place of all other sacrifices. That is, of course, the sacrifice of Christ. And fourthly, he's polluted the temple by bringing in non-Jewish people. It was forbidden for Gentiles to enter into the inner part of the temple. If it goes so far and no further. This, in fact, is not true. St. Paul had not brought any non-Jews into the temple. But when you're wanting to kill somebody, who cares about incidentals? Carrying on. We'll see why. For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And the way that St. Luke is writing that shows that St. Luke certainly did not think that St. Paul had brought St. Trophimus into the temple. Okay, so they have absolutely no proof of this. They're just supposing it to be the case. So what is the reaction of the local people? They are disturbed. And for this, you need to think about, back last summer, there were some horrible murders in this country, which ended up in quite a number of riots amongst people who were quicker with their fists than with their brains. And in some countries, notoriously, if you see a Quran being burned, the whole city where that happens will fly into a rage, and they'll take the person and murder them. And in other parts of the world, if somebody's blasphemes the local god, then people fly into another rage and go and kill them. And huge numbers of people do this. It's difficult to think of that happening nowadays, but it does. As was shown last summer, even in this country, where we tend to think of ourselves as being reasonably civilized. Verse 30, and all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now that's quite interesting. So you have this excitable crowd. They run and grab Paul, drag him outside. And it's interesting then that the temple doors are shut. You might think, oh, they didn't want the riot to take place in here. Not at all. That wasn't the idea. They shut the doors for 2 reasons. The first one is this. Had St. Paul been able to get back into the temple, he could legitimately ask for asylum within it. And nobody would be able to touch him, beat him, kill him, or anything like that. He would have that security within there. So they shut the doors so St. Paul can't get back in. And demand asylum from them. And secondly, St. John Chrysostom says so that no other Gentiles could come in either, because they're choosing to believe that St. Paul has brought Gentiles with him. So they clear the temple, shut the doors. And now they're saying, let's see what's going to happen on the other side of the door. Not that they really cared. Okay, 31. Now, as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the command of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in uproar. And you might think that he cared about St. Paul. He didn't. He cared about the uproar, because the main thing that Romans really enjoyed and liked was not so much peace and contentment of the crowds, but order. And this order they called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. You could do whatever you liked, so long as you didn't disturb that. And that's rather like you notice some of the various dictators around the world. You can usually do whatever you like, so long as you don't threaten the dictator, and you carry the party line, and you do all things just like he says. Are there any she's? I'm not sure. And then you're fine. But once you step out of line, then they'll kill you. And the Romans were just like that. So, although the people intend murder, the Romans are not so fussed about the fact that they intend murder. So they don't arrest the people who are doing the murdering. They arrest the person who's going to be murdered. And if you don't see anything strange in that, well, you must live in a different part of the world than I do, because I'd hope that nowadays our police would arrest the people who are trying to murder and let the person who is the potential victim go. Anyway, they simply seek to keep order. And the best way to keep order in this particular case is to take Paul into custody. So what does he do? Verse 32. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. So soldiers and centurions. In other words, we're dealing with some pretty large force. A large group of people have come out. The whole city is in uproar. They haven't just sent a few bubs to go and collect St. Paul. They've come out in force. They've emptied themselves out of this fortress, and they have come down there in order to settle the peace, kill whoever needs to be killed, and carry on from there. So quite a few troops, a frighteningly large number, because when they saw all the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. And this is a sort of little dig from St. Luke. These good, pious people were willing to kill Paul in, as it were, God's name, in order to do God's will. And when they were killing a defenseless man, they were quite happy to do God's will. Okay? However, once they saw there were a whole heap of soldiers around who might have a different feeling, then God's will went out of the window. He could, if he wanted it done, he could do it himself. By the way, I've always thought that the most significantly easy person to kill any blasphemer is, of course, God. So if somebody commits blasphemy and God does nothing about it, then, well, that's his business. We don't need to do anything about it either. So God doesn't do anything about it. So they stop beating Paul to death. When they see that, oh, it might be God's will, but it's not the soldier's will. It's not the commander's will. Okay? And verse 33 and 34, then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains. So he's taken into pretty secure security. We're not sure. We don't know whether this means he bound him hands and feet, which he could have done, or more likely that he put a chain on each hand and a soldier either side of him, which is in fact what happens nowadays, even in our society. So if somebody is, I don't know, a prisoner, they have to go to the hospital, they'll go with chained to an officer or two officers, depending on who they are. And he asked who he was and what he had done. So he's asking the crowd rather than Paul what he has done. What's he done? Why are you trying to kill him? And some among the multitude cried one thing, and some another. So when he could not ascertain the truth because of the tumult, he commanded him to be taken into the barracks. And there we go. So why has he arrested him? He has no reason to arrest him. There's nothing he has done. They cannot come up with any charge. And that is going to be important from now on for the whole of the rest of Acts of the Apostles. Paul indeed is in prison, and there is no charge, none whatever. And nobody can find any good reason to carry on keeping him in prison. And right at the very end of Acts of the Apostles, you find that St. Paul is still there, guarded by a soldier, now in Rome, teaching and preaching and doing all the things he normally does. And he stays there for 2 years, looking after himself in his own apartment. After which we don't know what happened, but we have a pretty good idea that the Romans released him. And he then went all over the shop and came back at some point where he was then executed in Rome. Okay, you'll remember that Agabus does not say that Paul is going to be executed. He said he was going to be bound. Okay, right. Penelope, good morning. Good morning, Simon. Fotini, I had no idea. Yesterday is the feast day of Saint Fotini and her various companions. Quite interesting it should be, because a friend of mine, whom Frank knew, was called Fotini. She died 21 years ago today. Lovely person. She was 45 when she died of ovarian cancer, in a very miserable state, actually. It really ravished her, made her very, very ill. And it was interesting. She had a huge devotion to Saint Fotini, her patron saint, because she herself, Philippa Fotini, had become Orthodox as a result of going to the Holy Well at Holywell. And therefore took the name Fotini, of the woman at the well. And that she died on St. Fotini's Day was seen at the time, and is still seen now, as being something of a blessing. Gabriel, good morning. Under a lot of spiritual attack lately, need all the prayer I can get. Yet a great Holy Lent. If you would say a prayer for me, I would much appreciate. Certainly, Gabriel. We'll be praying for you and are praying for you already. Dino, good morning, Dino. I'm wondering how your son is. Good morning, God bless you. Ben, you need to rejoice that Ben, who has just bought himself a new car, a bright red car. More than that, I can't tell you. What did he say it was? He did tell me yesterday. I can recognize cars. They make a lot of noise and have wheels. And apart from that, that's about it for me. Simon says, like Abbot Trifon, he crops up due to the artificial intelligence. Very good. Hello, God bless you also. Simon says, the angels share, Father, it helps the frustration. Good. You know, flat banquets. Simon struggles again, sadly. Well, carry on praying for him. Joe, good morning, Joe. Joe, I'm hoping you're going to be able to make it to Vespers this evening. Because it's great Vespers this evening. I'm not sure if anybody else knows how to serve that. And I'd like to get Deacon Panagiotis actually doing Great Vespers with me, which will be his first time. So if anybody's got the energy and the ability, they can come and pray alongside us and see this happen. Oh yeah, stuff fell on the floor. That's some very strange stuff. One thing tipped over, which knocked something else, knocked something else, knocked something else, and on it went onto the floor. Joe, it is not a Bugatti. There we go. Right, we've got people to pray for. Gabriel has asked for our prayers, so let me pray for you, Gabriel. Bradley Stanton, entering into the catechumenate, have a query. Does taking a baptismal name mean you don't use your secular name anymore? Well, it's up to you. I think there's a lot to be said for using both. When I was baptized, I took my baptismal name and I used it for everything. And then when I was ordained, as it happened, I was returned to my original name. So my original name is Philip. But certainly, most people will use their baptismal name only really when receiving communion, getting married, or anything like that, unless it's the original name their parents gave them. So I don't know, let's say you take the name Andrew, then the priest would know your name is Andrew, you declare your name is Andrew when you went to confession or got married, or all the other things that happen when you got buried, you'd be called Andrew as well. If you're going to be ordained, you'll be called Andrew to begin with, and then change your name to what it was going to be. But you can use your secular name. That's entirely up to you, but it becomes more of a sort of nickname. So if your name is Bradley, and you had an Andrew as your baptismal name, then that's the name you have in church, and then all your friends, relations, your parents, and so on, they will carry on calling you Bradley. Okay? I know some priests who might be called something like, I don't know, Aristobulus, but at home they're known to all their family as Pete. Okay? So it's up to you. It doesn't matter. All right? Right. So praying for Gabriel. Also, please pray for Nicholas and his brother Andreas, both of whom are quite ill. Andreas is slightly better. Nicholas is rather worse. For Nicoletta and for Nicoletta. For Daniel, for his continued survival and health. For Daniel is 18. Hillary, who's having fairly aggressive chemotherapy at the moment. For Erin's Joseph. For Dino's Simon, who Dino's just told us is struggling at the moment. For Christina and for her daughter Elizabeth. For Thekla and her mother Carol, who is ill. For Andre, who is terminally ill with very aggressive pancreatic cancer. Pray for Georgia, for Jane, who is having palliative care at the moment. For Hector from Mexico, who's asked for our prayers. And for Angie, who has suffered a whole series of strokes recently and is in hospital and exceedingly ill. Okay, so please pray for them too. There we go. I think that's everybody. I see Father Christopher has come. Good morning, Father, your prayers. And Joey, thank you for your prayers. God bless you and keep you. Okay, I think that is all for today. God willing, all other things being equal, we will meet again tomorrow. Ben, it's not a Bugatti. That'll be the next one. I don't even know what one would look like. Even if one was to run me over, I'd be hard pushed to tell the police what ran me over. I'd say, I know it wasn't a donkey cart. It was red. I guess I could have a look. Yeah, shall we have a look? Show everybody your new wheel, shall we, Ben? Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. And what is it? It is a Ford. I know that because I can see, you'd have to, I can't show you that picture. There's somebody sitting inside it. This one here might be a bit easier. There you are. I've taken off the number plate, Ben, so people can avoid stealing it for you. There, look, Ben's new wheels. Congratulations, Ben. That's a big thing to have. Okay. Oh, you're just outside, are you now? Oh, I shall look forward to seeing it. To go out there and bless it for you. Okay, God bless you and keep you, everybody. Your prayers. Bye-bye. Ben has a hamster called cat food. What sort of person calls a hamster cat food? Honestly, Lord help us.